This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. With your host, Tyson Gifford and William Rorick. Episode 134, recorded November 16, 2017. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. I am your host, the editor-in-chief of TV Enthusiast. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at TVE, William Rorick.
Hello.
So, today we are going to continue talking about Stranger Things and Mr. Robot. Just a little note, next week, you might be thinking that we're doing like 2 episodes at a time for Stranger Things straight through. Just because of the nature of this season of Stranger Things and the way it played out. Next week, we're only going to be covering 1 episode, and then we're going to cover the last 2 episodes the following week. And yes, we are going to have a podcast next week, even though it's Thanksgiving week. It's just might not be available at the same time. We're going to figure something out around that, but we'll have something. But in the meantime, before we get started with Mr. Robot and Stranger Things, we do have some news stories. So last week, we talked about the breaking news that the Tolkien estate was shopping around Lord of the Rings, and the main kind of buyers that they were looking at were Amazon, Netflix, and HBO, I believe. Yes. And what the report seemed to say was HBO dropped out pretty quickly, then Netflix dropped out when they just asked for way too much, and Amazon was like, "That's a lot of money. We're all in."
Yeah. Amazon basically desperate for a hit.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos is willing to spend obscene amounts of money on whatever as long as he believes it's going to be a hit for Amazon.
At the time when we talked about it last week, we both were like, this is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. This isn't going to be worth the money that you're going to lose on it. But at the same time, I think we also came to the conclusion that for a tech company, this probably isn't that big of a deal. Just as far as like the money that the tech industry has versus the money that like Hollywood has. Yeah, and the kind of money that Amazon will drop just on a whim is way beyond what they're spending here. So it's probably not that big of a deal for them, right. Only because of the size of the company and how much money they have. It's still not a great idea though. It's still not going to be necessarily a worthwhile investment. It's not going to ruin Amazon.
No, it's not. This is going to be the end of Amazon. You're going to still be able to get your shopping done.
It's just if it ends up failing like we think it does, it's just gonna make them look stupid.
Right.
That's all it is.
It's just gonna make them look incompetent at running a video service, which I believe they are.
And they already look like that.
And they already, to most people, definitely.
Well, the news this week is that the deal did go through, and they bought the rights for close to $250 million. It's not just a straight up cash buy on the rights. There's like points, and it all works out to about $250 million at the end that Amazon paid. This is just for the rights. This isn't for the production, anything.
Oof. Yikes.
It's also worth noting a few other conditions on here. One is that the deal does not cover the Silmarillion, which is kind of like the Bible of the series.
Oh, ouch. That's not good.
It's a lot of background material. It does not cover that in the deal. That was basically like all of Tolkien's notes that were found kind of after his death, along with some stuff that his son wrote as well.
Well, how can you even do that without that material?
Well, I think they can use the material that's at hand. They didn't really use that for Lord of the Rings. They did use it for The Hobbit, though, I believe.
Right.
When they did that, the Hobbit movie is split into 3. But yeah, it's a little tricky. They're not remaking the trilogy.
Right.
This is a prequel series. This is set before the events of Fellowship of the Ring. They're not saying how far before. It could be after The Hobbit. It could be before. They're not really saying. They're just saying events that precede Fellowship of the Ring. There's no real details on that. And part of the reason why there's no real details on that is that they have no creative talent tied to this project yet.
Right. So they have no
showrunner, nobody,
So there's no details because because they don't even have details.
Yeah, they basically just decided we're going to do something in this time without somebody creative making that decision, which is also not necessarily a great sign.
That's not a good sign, no. You know that whatever creative is brought in, they've already made decisions for this. Creative is not going to be able to drive an effective vision for the show because Amazon is controlling the show.
Yeah.
That's also a bad side. Yeah, that's a problem.
So another problem that, maybe it could be remedied, maybe it wouldn't. It would be stupid if they don't remedy this, is that according to Deadline, Amazon has not reached out in any capacity to Peter Jackson or his writing partners, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, which is really exceptionally dumb. And I'm going to say why. It's not just because that they'd made really good movies from the source material. It's because when they made those movies, it was in Jackson's contract that he kept every costume, every prop. Like how the locations were done with these gigantic, they called it bigatures, or like these giant miniatures that they used to photograph for all the major locations, the big cities, everything like that. There's like a ton of like R&D notes. Peter Jackson owns all of that.
Wow.
So think about the resources they could use if they did that. I mean, there's thousands upon thousands of like swords, sets of armor, costuming that's like elaborate feature quality stuff, like really expensive stuff. The entire set for the Shire is like a real set, like a practical set that exists that he owns, that Peter Jackson owns. And he also owns a separate set that's like an interior that's made for the actors so that they appear small inside of the Frodo's house. Can't remember. Bag End.
Yeah, sure.
They had 2 scale versions of that. They had like a small version for like Ian McKellen, so he looked huge in it, and a big version so that Frodo and stuff would look really small in it. And the big version is literally on Peter Jackson's home property.
Oh wow.
So it's all there, like all this stuff. If they haven't reached out to him at all.
Yeah, they're doing everything wrong they could possibly do with this.
Yeah, I mean Peter Jackson, it was famously mapped out the entire world of Middle Earth, locations, all the characters, how characters are related to each other. There's tons of R&D notes that he worked through. It's famously worked through. This isn't just what you typically have with a director that does all this stuff. He went way overboard. All that stuff they're not going to have any access to. That's just dumb.
Yeah, it's going to be a failure.
Because they're either going to have to recreate it or ignore it.
Right, exactly.
And it's just and you look at the expense already with the licensing.
Look at the expense, my guess is they're going to ignore it.
So
my guess is now with the money they spent on acquiring the license, they're going to try and put a show together as cheaply as possible.
Apparently not, because Hollywood Reporter is estimating that the entire series run, which is expected to go about 5 seasons with a possible spinoff as well, that entire run should cost upwards of $1 billion.
Holy shit.
Making it the most expensive TV series of all time.
Yeah, but is Hollywood Reporter assuming that Amazon's going to put the appropriate amount of money into the production?
I don't know. I mean, they got some smart people there at Hollywood Reporter.
Or do they know something?
They have some industry insiders.
It just sounds like they're speculating on the budget based off what you would expect.
But they do have more information than we do.
You should reasonably expect that, they'd have to do this and this and this to make a good show.
They definitely have more information.
And Amazons could be thinking, no, we can cut that. We can cut that. We can cut around corners here. And,
it's going to be like a 1990s syndicated fantasy series.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be fucking...
The special effects are going to look like the monsters in Reboot.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be all blocky polygons and...
Oh, my God.
It's weightless and doesn't interact with the real world backgrounds at all. Well, who knows? I can't imagine. I think they're going to spend heavy. I think Amazon's going to spend heavy on this because they're paying so much for the licensing fee.
Legend of the Seeker.
Yeah. don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to spend heavy.
I think so.
Because, Amazon's crazy and they do that. Like, they've cut corners on their other shows and stuff, but the fact that they're paying this much for the license alone, I think they have to.
They're never going to recoup that. They're never going to recoup that.
Yeah, I don't think they plan to. I think it's a prestige play. The problem is does that prestige really matter anymore? Like, are there enough fans that still want Lord of the Rings material?
No, I don't.
Cause I feel like that's all been sated, like.
Yeah, I don't think so, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, some numbers to go over here real quick though, and that's that Netflix's bid for the rights for the series was reportedly $100 million. So Amazon went basically 2.5 times what Netflix's bid was.
Wow.
Apparently there's some bitterness between some of the studios involved in the original films as well as Peter Jackson, from the Tolkien estate, who were shopping this around because the Tolkien estate ended up only making about $3 million for the trilogy.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. And what might have gotten lost in the shuffle is, and a key reason this is even happening, Christopher Tolkien, who's zealously guarded the rights to Lord of the Rings up until now, has officially stepped down as the head of the Tolkien estate.
And so the rest of the Tolkien estate went cash in.
Yep, pretty much. He's out of the way. So if there's bitterness, yeah, Tolkien's policies, he was very protective of the IP. When Warner Brothers and Peter Jackson were dealing with the Tolkien estate, they had to go through him, and he was very conservative about what he would allow. But now with this bid by Amazon, he had apparently stepped down, and Amazon just got lucky too, where whoever's running the estate now is more willing to.
Or the estate got lucky because Amazon's just insane.
Yeah. Well, Amazon got lucky because Christopher Tolkien probably wouldn't have sold Amazon all these rights for even what they paid. They just got lucky to where it's now controlled by people who are more willing to shop around the IP.
Yeah. So to finish off with some numbers here, the films, the entire trilogy grossed a combined $2.9 billion worldwide. The third film won 11 Oscars, including Best Picture in 2004. And lastly, the studios and kind of partnerships involved in this Amazon production are Amazon Studios, Warner Brothers TV, the Tolkien Estate and Trust, HarperCollins, which is the publisher of the book series, and New Line Cinema, who distributed the films.
Right.
So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen too.
Yeah.
Which is also a little troubling, especially since they don't have a creative. It's like they have a bazillion executive producers and not a single writer. It's a little concerning.
It's all producers, no creatives.
Yeah, it's all money men.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's Lord of the Rings and Amazon. Whether it ends up being the biggest flop of all time, a big disgrace, or like something that revolutionizes TV forever, whatever it ends up being, it's a huge story. And that's why we want to talk about that up front at the beginning of the podcast.
Yep, it's huge. Amazon is still a major player in the streaming business. This was their major power play to grow that business, and they're hoping the familiarity of the IP, the grandness of it, will attract many more people to Amazon.
Let's see how that works out for them.
Yes.
Next up, we have one more piece of news before we get onto our main topics, which is that Derek Kolstad, who's the creator of John Wick, the writer, not the director, so it's not the one that's working on the new Deadpool film, but the writer, is developing a Hitman TV series for Hulu. So I don't mean a TV show about a hitman, although it's also that. I mean that it's based on the video game Hitman, which comes from IO Interactive, formerly Eidos, and then Square Enix. IO, the developer, now owns the rights to publish it. And they, I believe, just released a new game, or they're releasing a new game soon, in the series. And it's going to be the first one published under under their own publishing house.
That's interesting.
But Kolstad is going to write the pilot, and he's going to executive produce along with Adrian Askyria, I probably butchered that, and Chuck Gordon, much easier name, who both worked on the previous Hitman films. And so Hitman's been adapted twice. It's not like a Hitman movie and a sequel, but two separate attempts, basically.
Two separate attempts at a movie, yeah. One with Timothy Oliphant.
Yep, from Justified and Deadwood.
Yep, from Justified and Deadwood. I don't know who was in the other one, actually.
It's a guy from Homeland. I don't know the actor's name, but he was in Homeland.
Oh, okay.
That one's supposedly the better of the two.
Of the two movies.
Neither really took off.
No. The attempts to make a successful film franchise have not been successful.
Yeah. This project is being headed up by Fox 21, which is, 20th Century Fox's like TV development wing. So they're the ones making it, and Hulu is the one that's going to be distributing it. The only kind of concern I have here with this story is that I don't really think that Hitman has a great plot to really dive into on like a TV show level.
No, I agree.
With a lot of characterization, I don't really think it's there. And I believe that this writer was originally working on something in the John Wick universe for TV before, and I think this might be the
I heard something
last nail in the coffin of that.
Damn.
Which would be disappointing because not only is John Wick really good, but there's like a really kind of interesting mythology to it, and it could be really interestingly expanded upon with a TV series, not on John Wick himself, but just in that world, because there's a lot of kind of like weird, kind of cool stuff going on in that world,
right?
To explore that I'm much more interested in than the Hitman story. But that isn't necessarily the case that one is gone and the other's existing. For all we know, the John Wick spin-off series could still be in existence. We just don't know. But that doesn't look good. Let's move on. Let's talk about the shows, the main shows we talk about in the show. So today we're talking about Stranger Things episode 5, Dig Dug, and episode 6, The Spy. And we're going to be talking about Mr. Robot episode 3.5 _ killprocess.inc with their weird naming convention. But let's start with Mr. Robot Dig Dug, Chapter 5. When we left off last week, we were talking about, they had this really cool shot with Hopper in this tunnel in Hawkins that like basically was the Upside Down in Hawkins, and how they like did that shot and you get that bass line that was like beating as the camera turned around to kind of go, oh, upside down, This is where this kind of picks up. Hopper's like, oh shit, I'm in basically the Upside Down. He's kind of wandering around through it, and he gets sprayed in the face a few times with these flower pot things.
Creepy flower pot things in like the ground.
Yeah, and they spray some stuff on him that kind of makes his vision a little blurry and makes him kind of sick.
So we see how the entities in the Upside Down kind of capture their prey, right?
Yeah.
They kind of like it's not they disorient you and knock you out, and then they get their hooks or tentacles on you.
Mm-hmm. And then if you've ever seen a hentai, you know what happens next. So while this is happening with Hopper, he gets knocked out. He like from, coughing and stuff in that scene. But while that's happening, Will has a vision of Hopper and goes out to see Joyce. But they can't really figure it out. And then right on cue comes Bob, and we finally get to see kind of like the worth of his character.
Right. That he's like super smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we finally get that. We see his and he's really cool in the episode too. I just love the way that like, they're like, no questions, just help us with this puzzle, And then like he walks into the house and sees all the drawings, and he's all like, okay.
Okay. But then he starts piecing it together, what it is.
Once he kind of notices like a connection, all of a sudden he's like, he doesn't care anymore. Like his concern concerns are gone. He's just hooked into the puzzle.
He's hooked into the puzzle. He's in puzzle solving mode at that point, right? Like he switches modes or something, you know?
Yeah, the switch is flipped in his head.
Yeah.
And he's like, looking around and he's figuring it all out that this is like, that the blank spots
basically
are
a map
running
of
water.
Yeah.
And the tunnels don't go through running water. And by doing that, he's able to kind of figure out like it as a map of Hawkins and figure out where the spot was that Hopper had noticed before he took off.
Right.
So they kind of figure that out. While that's happening, Nancy and Jonathan visit the neighborhood conspiracy theorist.
Oh yeah, that guy.
So they basically unleash the story on him.
Yeah, they unleashed the story on him.
Which was funny, basically like even before they started telling the story, because they cut away when they were going to start telling the story, and you could just see kind of like the look on their two faces as they're about to say it, and all you could think is like, "Oh, this guy, he's in for the adventure of a lifetime." So they regale him with the tales of the Upside Down and Will Byers and everything else that went on there, and he gives the really smart advice that the public isn't going to like buy this story.
Yeah, like, that all sounds.
They have it on tape. They have that evidence, but
right.
It doesn't.
But it could be spun. They have that evidence, but it can be spun.
Yeah, and it's not gonna. Nobody is gonna buy the monsters and hell portal to a different world. Nobody is gonna buy that. So he kind of suggests changing the story a little bit to where they could still kind of find a way to basically give a big middle finger to this agency, give some peace to Barb's parents, but not by telling the truth, by telling like a different kind of take on the death.
Right, exactly.
So they come up with a story about toxins.
Much more believable.
And so this episode, like while they're doing this is the kind of like, let's reveal everything about the Upside Down to some characters episode.
Right.
Let's bring people that weren't into everything in it, because also happening at this time, Lucas finally decides he's going to reveal everything to Max.
Right.
And he goes and he tells her story and she reacts exactly as you'd expect.
Right. That's ridiculous. That's a prank, like a funny prank.
And so while everybody's off on these separate adventures, Dustin's like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
I have an adolescent Demogorgon. And he's trying to get in contact with everybody. Nobody's responding at all. There's kind of some funny stuff with like Lucas's sister getting fed up with his constant walkie-talkie noise. But yeah, it's like nobody's taking him seriously. Nobody's listening.
Well, Will is in the hospital.
Yeah, and with Mike, and so it's like everybody's off.
Yeah, we didn't explain what happened there, did we, when they saved Hopper?
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet in the episode yet. There's still some more stuff that happened in the episode. I was like, I got confused for a second. I'm like, oh wait, oh yeah, okay. But even at this point, Mike is with Will when they're at Will's house. Right. So Dust just can't reach anybody. Everybody's kind of busy doing their own things, and he's contacting everybody. He's contacting Nancy, Jonathan, everybody involved in this. Finally, when he tries to go to Will's or Mike's house and has no luck, he notices Steve going to the same house because he's trying to kind of like apologize to Nancy and try to reconcile with her. And he's like, no, screw that. Come with me. I need you right now.
Yeah, exactly.
and so begins, as it's been described on the internet, Steve's adventures in babysitting moment.
Steve's adventures in babysitting. Yeah. Which is cool because we got to see two characters get together, like probably the most unlikely pairing of characters in the show, And we got to see them kind of bond and yeah.
So it was kind of cute and fun all at the same time. And basically they're going to the basement of Dustin's basement where he locked up Dart.
Yeah.
And they're going to go and try to recover.
And Dart has got...
Oh, Dustin just couldn't do it on his own.
Right. Dustin couldn't do it on his own, obviously.
Like from the trailer, Dustin asked Steve if he still has the bat, and he said, "What bat?" And he said, "The one with all the nails in it." And that was actually Jonathan's bat that Steve ended up with, like in the struggle, in all the chaos of the last season.
In the chaos with the Demogorgon, yeah. That was actually Jonathan's bat.
So he goes to help him. They're going to his place to do that. Before they get there, it cuts away. We get a little bit about 11. She leaves. She takes off. She's on her way to find her mom, who's in the care of her sister. She ends up communicating with her mom.
Yes.
By way of like a montage of visions that basically tell her mom's story from the point at which she was basically when she was pregnant through.
Well, she's like she's kind of in a catatonic state now because she's been lobotomized.
Yeah.
Or not really lobotomized, but her brain was fried.
Shock treatment, I think they did on her.
Yeah. I think it more accurately say her brain was fried.
Yeah.
She's in this catatonic state. 11 realizes that she has abilities similar to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, 11 realizes that she could communicate. And so that's what she does. She communicates with her mother psychically, and her mother kind of shows her the events that led to the events.
Her current enfeebled state.
Yeah, her current enfeebled state.
And through that, the big reveal, besides just the kind of ruthless way in which they fried her brain, 11 sees a girl that would play with 11, that trained with her, that was somebody else from the program. This is obviously, just by looking at her and based on, just following basic storytelling conventions, this is the girl we saw at the very beginning of the season. This is 8.
Right.
So now 11 knows there's somebody else like her out there.
Right.
We go back to Joyce, Bob, Will, and Mike. They're out to rescue Hopper. They drive out to the field where Hopper is. He's like tangled up with those things. It almost seems like he's dead. They kind of dig their way into the tunnels. And this is like now Bob is basically getting his baptism in the Upside Down verse.
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
And so they're going through the tunnels and they find Hopper, and they're basically getting attacked by the tunnel, and they're trying to run out of there. And I love like Bob and Hopper reacting to each other. Like,
oh yeah.
Hopper and Joyce like hugged, and they're like, she's like, "You're okay," and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine," and then he just kind of like pats Bob on the side of his like arm or something, and it's like, "Hey Bob," and Bob's like, "Hey Hopper." It's just like so casual. I just loved it. But and the big thing at the end of the episode, the way this episode ends, is that just as they're like freaking out and like trying to get out of this tunnel and it's just looking dark for them, all of a sudden they run straight into a bunch of men in, hazmat suits with flamethrowers from the lab,
mm-hmm.
who start torching the tunnel the same way they have earlier in the season, where we've seen that they've been doing regular torchings on the tunnel, or on the passageway. And so they're torching these tunnels now the same way, which has an adverse reaction on Will, who just kind of collapses and starts like shaking violently and looks like he's basically like going into a seizure.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of crowds around him, and that's kind of how the episode ends. It's like, oh shit, they can't really kill the Upside Down and Hawkins without killing him.
It's connected to him,
Yeah, he's deeply connected. And that brings us to where you were talking about as we go into episode 6, The Spy, and what you were talking about Will being in the hospital. That's where this begins. Will, he wakes up in the hospital. He's got some memory loss.
Right.
Dr. Owens is now in with them, communicating through the whole thing. They're now kind of accepting that there is, finally he's kind of accepting that this isn't in Will's head. This isn't PTSD. This is something else. As, what did Mike call it? Mike had like a term for it.
Oh, geez. I can't remember that.
of like seeing through the monster's eyes, basically, or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but Dr. Owens is kind of like, he's kind of like accepting that now, that what Will was seeing is this thing. And he kind of identifies it as like a virus that's in Will. It's like in his brain. And then, that this thing is tied to Will. It's got its own defense mechanism to protect itself. and they can't burn the tunnels because of, it'll kill Will. And, the people in his lab aren't necessarily happy about that he's not killing Will, which is putting Dr. Owens in a good light for us, the audience.
Right.
Because he's basically fighting against the other people who are just like, fuck the kid, burn the tunnels.
Yeah, pretty much. The other people don't seem to care. The doctor here, he seems to actually have a conscience. It doesn't seem like it's interesting to me, because it doesn't seem like they're playing the government as the bad guys now.
Yeah.
In this season, like they were the first time.
They're still a little sketchy, but they're not outright sketchy, villains.
Yeah, it's not like the government spooks for season 1 where they were obviously evil, out to do no good.
Just outright murdering people.
Just outright murdering people and just being, it just seems like these guys are just trying to clean up the mess as best as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's really their only agenda, but we don't know.
But they're not necessarily kind about the way they're handling it. They're some of the people there are panicking, just destroy it all. Who cares about the boy? And then the doctor is having kind of a crisis of conscience about it.
Yeah.
That's painting him in a good light. Meanwhile, over with Nancy and Jonathan, they bone. That's about it.
I mean, the whole plot line with them going to that crazy guy with the evidence was just to further that ship. Further that romantic plot line.
Yeah. That ends. They return to the home, and that's when they see, they get a nice little surprise of Will's artwork all scattered around the house, up the walls.
Yes.
And they're like, oh shit, what's going on? Where is everybody?
Right, because everybody's gone.
What's really going on again?
Something crazy's happening, right?
Yeah. Dustin finally manages to contact Lucas. And so they meet up, and so now it's Dustin, Lucas, Max, and Steve all in the same place. Max wants proof about this happening, so she's following him to basically get it. Mm-hmm. Because Lucas is like, you want proof? Well, this is where it is. Come with me. Dustin isn't happy that Lucas told Max because it was a team decision of whether or not they'd tell her, and he just kind of did it. He went rogue and did it on his own.
Right.
But they end up going to the same junkyard that we saw in the first season where the boys were hiding out in the abandoned school bus.
Well, Dustin figures it's a good spot to lure the Demogorgon, and it would and the bus would provide them shelter so that once they lure it to where they need it, they can dispatch it relatively, as safely as possible using the bus for cover.
And they're just basically leaving trails of meat.
Yes.
To kind of get the Demogorgon there. They, so they're at the bus now. They've kind of set their trap and they're just waiting. We finally find out about Max and Billy, what their relationship is. Step siblings. Billy not happy about the situation. Apparently hasn't taken it well and has gotten worse for him as it's gone along. So while they set this trap, they see Dart and they realize that they need to go out to face it. So Steve goes out with the bat and he's walking up and it's kind of this tension as it's approaching him.
Right.
And that's when the kids still in the bus notice Dart's not the only one.
Yeah, there's another Demogorgon or another Dart.
And then a few more. They notice quite a few.
They're surrounded.
It's very much kind of like the Velociraptor scenes in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
You're focused on the one that's in your eyesight and then all the other ones come in on the sides, It's very similar tension to that scene. I kind of expected Steve to die in that scene saying "clever girls."
Oh Jesus! Man, that would have been.
He suddenly has an Australian accent or whatever.
Yeah. He's about to die and he develops an Australian accent out of nowhere. Yeah.
And decides to say "clever girl."
Clever girl. Yeah.
So there's this pack of the monsters and they're attacking. Steve runs back, gets his ass back in the bus, and they're just trying to kind of secure the bus now. The adolescent Demogorgons are thrashing at the bus, and one jumps up on top, and Max gets a real close-up view of that flower petal mouth of horrors that they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And loses her composure for the first time. She just kind of screams when she sees it.
Well, she got her proof, right?
So she's fully on board now. She knows it's all true. And suddenly, as this attack is happening, all of a sudden the Demogorgons just start retreating.
Right.
They're like, what the hell's going on? Well, through this episode, we knew that Will had given them a location on the map that like was supposed to be like a secret, like a spot that he wasn't supposed to see, that was dark to him, and that they figured was like maybe some form of weakness that they could exploit. So the department, the government, they've sent a bunch of troops out there, right, basically to kill everything in that spot or figure out what's in there. Unfortunately, we talked about this like little two-way connection that, this connection Will has with this thing.
Yeah.
We see Will basically crying and saying, I'm sorry I had to.
Right. It made me do it.
Mike realizes very quickly, oh shit, Will's the spy, as he called him.
Yep.
And he goes running, but of course, it's like a kid running down the halls, ranting and raving. The military just like, the people just kind of grab him and go, hold on, don't go past here.
Right, exactly. They just disregard him completely. And then the slaughter happens.
This is very like Aliens.
Very Aliens.
With this like tunnel and the group getting like ambushed by these creatures. And they slaughter it, and
the Institute screens go dark,
Yeah. They, after the slaughter happens there in the tunnel in that spot, the team that's at the Department of Energy watching the heat signatures and stuff on the map, they notice that those figures of those Demogorgons, this pack, which you see a bunch of dots, so there's a bunch of them, is actually heading towards them. Yes. And then they realize, oh shit, they're coming through. Those tunnels are connected to that deep underground thing that's right under the Department of Energy. And we see Hopper, he's in like scrubs, sitting in the thing overlooking where the breach is, the original breach, which is growing so much. And we just see a hand of a Demogorgon pop up above there. They're there. They're about to attack the Department of Energy. Will was screaming, we need to get out of here. We need to leave now. Shit's hit the fan. So obviously the next episode is going to be a big, crazy... Nope.
Nope.
Next week's episode is kind of like a little one-off side story. So we'll get there when we get there. We'll talk about that next week, and then we'll be back with kind of this...
Given the little bit I know is disappointing, but we'll get there when we... Like you said, we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, so next week we'll talk about the kind of the more controversial episode of the season that a lot of people didn't like. It's kind of a offshoot episode. We'll talk about that. And then the week after, we'll talk about the last two episodes of the season to finish off our discussion of the series. But what we will be talking about both next week and the week after with consistency are the next episodes of Mr. Robot, like we're going to talk about this week's episode, EPS 3.5 killprocess.inc. So last episode, we talked about being this really cool kind of like single shot episode, not really single shot, but designed to look like a single shot. They did a lot of like trickery to get around that. Right. Really cool. And we talked about how using that method drives up a lot of tension. So you go from like a super tense episode like that, using that method to really draw out the tension. And you're like, okay, so how are they going to follow that up? Well, they didn't do like a trick like they did in the last episode, but it was still super tense.
They followed it up with an even more intense episode. How about that?
An episode that didn't need the trick.
That didn't need the trick.
Yeah.
Like this was even like, to me, this episode was balls to the wall. Just like a tour de force. Basically, the long and short of it is, plot-wise, it's very simple. We pick up directly from last episode. Elliot's trying to stop this building from being blown up by the Dark Army. He infiltrates the E-Corp building in order to stop it, and ends up with resistance from Mr. Robot, who tries to stop him at every step of the way.
We should say before that it picks up directly where the last episode left off.
Oh, yeah. I was just giving a short summary of the episode. It's very plot-wise, it's very simple.
Well, I said it picks up exactly where the last episode left off, but I'm actually wrong now that I'm looking back. It starts off with the theme from Back to the Future.
Well, yeah, it does. And it actually starts off in the past with a scene with Elliot's dad and a young Angela know,
party at Angela's house. It's basically her mom's got cancer and is dying.
Yeah, her mom's
and
dying.
They're having like a farewell party for her before she dies.
Right, exactly.
Which Angela finds really morbid and doesn't want to be any part of.
Right. Angela's having a hard time dealing with the reality that she's going to lose her mom. You know, she's watching Back to the Future, the cartoon, probably comfort food basically for her, because we learned in the last season that Angela was a Back to the Future fan.
Angela and Elliot both.
Angela and Elliot both.
That was in the first season. Yeah, they had.
Oh yeah, that was the first season. Yeah,
they had a scene where Angela approached Elliot when he was kind of in the middle of his initial plan and was trying to get him to repair their relationship and just kind of hang out and watch Back to the Future 2, their favorite movie.
Right.
So this is like a tie. We know that there's some Back to the Future love between these two friends. In the scene, it's primarily Angela and Elliot's dad, not Mr. Robot, but Christian Slater, who plays Mr. Robot.
Yeah, it's very important to draw the distinction. Mr. Robot is a character in the of his father.
Yeah, Mr. Robot is in Elliot's head.
Yeah, Mr. Robot
on his father.
Yeah, based on his father.
This is his father.
His actual father. You can tell the two are not similar at all, except for appearance.
Yeah, Mr. Robot's like vindictive and focused and driven, and this guy's just really sweet.
Yes.
And it's kind of like weird watching his character looking very similar to Mr. Robot, not just because it's the same actor, but like, you know, his glasses and everything else, just kind of the way he's set up, but like with a completely different air about him. The way his eyes look, everything is completely different. Just the way he carries himself is completely different.
Yeah, just the way Again, excellent acting by Christian Slater. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You know off the bat that this isn't Mr. Robot talking to some random girl, and that this is in the past, and it's before anything's really revealed. You know what's going on.
Yeah.
And
And so Elliot's dad tells Angela that Elliot's not there, which is probably because Elliot kind of has issues dealing with change. He's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
So he has trouble with it. Same kind of, Angela's having trouble with it too. But you know, it's her mom, so she's there. And Elliot's dad is kind of trying to instill a little wisdom in her, which is that she has a limited amount of her time with her mom left. So instead of complaining about how morbid the party is or being upset about it and just being alone about it, that she needs to talk to her mom and spend time with her mom while she still has it.
Right, exactly.
So we kind of see like how this incident in her past has had such a big effect on Angela.
Right.
And that cuts directly to...
We know for a fact that Angela has never moved past that. That was probably the defining moment of her life when her mom died. So
we cut directly from that to Angela in the present with Elliot, right where it left off in the last episode with Elliot confronting her saying, "Do you have something you want to tell me?"
Right.
And Elliot's like, "What have you done? I saw you go into the room and do this and get that key so that you could kind of, you know, go against what I'm trying to do." And she's like, "I'm helping you with what you tried to do," meaning what Mr. Robot was setting up to do.
Right. Exactly.
You just need to follow through. And this is where Elliot's and Angela have come to like an impasse. Like they're not connecting anymore. Elliot's realizing that Angela has been betraying him, as he found out in the last episode, that she's been using him.
Yes.
And that he also learns in this that the reason Angela's using him is that in all apparentness, I mean, there's theories saying otherwise, and we'll address those a little bit later, after we finish breaking down the episode. But Angela's sipping on the crazy water a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's sipping on the crazy water. She's drinking the Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid that the Dark Army is selling her.
She's talking to Elliot about how Elliot's like, "You're going to blow up a building." And she's like, "So?"
It's going to make
he's like, "People are going to die.
Things are going to be so much better." Why?
He's like, "People are going to die." And she's like, "Nobody's going to die. Not even my mom or your dad. They're not going to die either."
Yeah.
And Elliot's like, "What?" he's like, what's going on here? Like, you know, and he's starting to kind of realize, you could see it sinking into him that like, that Angela has drunk the Kool-Aid, as he said.
Right.
That she's kind of bought into this like insanity, and he's just kind of like freaked out by what she's saying. And he kind of reaches a certain point where he's able to kind of figure out by the bag she has, which is what she got from the one Dark Army member who she had given the key to.
Oh, yeah.
Bag from the Red Wheelbarrow restaurant, which is something we've seen frequently in the season. It's where it's, I believe, maybe the first scene in the first episode, was it?
Yeah. Red Wheelbarrow plays a large part.
With, what's his name? The new character,
Irving.
Irving, yeah. So, we know that Irving has this connection to the Red Wheelbarrow. This is the place that he gets his card punched at where he wants to get his free milkshake from the first episode. That's that Red Wheelbarrow restaurant. We also know that was before where Irving had taken Elliot and his sister and had that little talk with them about everything. We know that was all at the Red Wheelbarrow restaurant. So we know that restaurant is central to like a lot of what's going on here. That
restaurant is a Dark Army front.
Yeah. And so Elliot sees that this bag that she has is a takeout bag from that restaurant. And he's able to kind of piece it together in his head. This is where it is. This is the problem. This is where Tyrell is. Even though she doesn't give him anything, he figures it out. And he leaves because he's like, she's gone. Like, Angela's out of it. He can't talk to her, you know? It's not going to do anything. Knowing that his sister is spying on him to the FBI now, Elliot contacts her directly and tells her exactly where Tyrell Wellick is. And tell the FBI, this is where Tyrell Wellick is. I don't have time to talk anymore. Just do it, you know, and hangs up. He's desperately trying to stop it. He's headed towards the building that you mentioned, that the one E-Court building that is supposed to be blown up in stage 2.
Right. He's headed to that building.
So he's headed towards there. He's trying to send the FBI to get Wellick at the restaurant while he's doing that.
Dom approaches her boss about
Agent Santiago
about the lead.
He's a plant from the Dark Army.
Yeah, we know he's a Dark Army plant at this point. So she's trying to get him to do something, and he is trying to, come up with excuses as to why he can't take action without saying, without blowing his cover.
Which is really frustrating Dom. You can see she's like almost on the edge of tears in frustration.
Yeah, she is super frustrated.
She's like, what do you mean? Like, let's just go in and get him.
Like, she's basically like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, Santiago is really stretching the limits of credibility here, and Dom's not stupid, she's not like gonna sit there and just like accept it, because she can, even if she doesn't realize it, she could sense that, something's fishy, something's up.
Yeah. So she's really frustrated. She slinks back to her office trying to kind of figure out what's going on. She's been, communicating while she's frustrated with Darlene, trying to get Darlene to get more information as Darlene's trying to get information herself, saying, the information I got you, did that get anything? I'm on pins and needles here. And Dom's like, I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you anything. And even though she's saying it like that, the real reason is because she doesn't know anything because she's being held back.
Right, exactly.
So her conversations with Darlene are just exacerbating her own frustration about not being able to do anything. While this is happening, because she's left Santiago's office, he's texted Irving, sent him a message that, their cover location is blowing and he needs to get Tyrell out of there. Irving, then we don't see Irving do it, but we know it just the way it's looped back. He contacts White Rose. And White Rose is at some kind of like a benefit or ball or some kind of a event.
He's at the Mar-a-Lago.
Okay.
Did you see the napkins that said Mar-a-Lago?
No, I didn't even notice them.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So is that why they were making fun of Trump with the was it Trump they were making fun of talking about the person that they'd have to go on the boat with and how ridiculous he was?
The owner of this place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
They
didn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
So a little Trump bashing in there.
Yeah.
He and the E-Court guy, for the E-Court president, he's like, well, I delivered. Are you going to hold up your end? And he's basically says that he will hold up his end, but he says it in a cryptic way, which we know is interpreted as, it's kind of like saying, oh, don't worry, you'll get what's coming to you. It's basically that,
Yeah, it's basically that. That's the way he phrases it,
So the E-Court president's like, oh, goody.
Oh, goody. Yeah.
And making a little bit of small talk with him, and they're kind of joking around, like you said, about Trump, something I didn't pick up on until just now. About how ridiculous Trump is, how clownish he is. But we know at this point, White Rose gets that message and contacts Irving back and basically tells him, well, you know what to do. Again, being kind of cryptic, like, oh, does this mean he needs to kill Tyrell? Like, what's going on with this? We still kind of don't really know what's going on with that, but we'll get to that. While this is happening, Darlene herself ends up leaving her apartment against Dom's wishes and confronts Angela, threatening to report her to the FBI. That's who, Dom had been criticizing Darlene for still protecting somebody. That was Angela.
Yes.
Angela's still insisting nobody's going to be hurt, and Darlene's all like, not as directly as what she said to Elliot, is also starting to realize that Angela's drunk the Kool-Aid.
Right.
And is getting frustrated with her. While that's all happening, Elliot is now in that E-Court building that's supposed to blow up, and he's nervous because he knows it could blow up at any point. There's no direct time it's going to blow up, so it could blow up while he's in there. He's really nervous about that. But he goes in there. He ends up finding a location to do that. But that's when he starts getting these weird glitches. And it looks exactly like a visual glitch. But what's happening is when those glitches occur, Mr. Robot is taking control of his body.
Right. Mr. Robot is actively fighting against him.
Yeah, so he'll be he was in the office, the first glitch happens, and he comes to and he's in a car being driven away. He's in a taxi being driven away from the building.
Being driven away from the building, yeah.
But he's still close to the building, so he kind of gets out and runs back to the building after pissing off the cabbie, who speeds off, all pissed off. But so he gets back into the building, starts working on the code again, gets set up to do it again, glitches again. All of a sudden, he's in the elevator. So Mr. Robot keeps taking control and walking him away. So if you kind of think about what this must look like from anybody else's perspective, he's typing something, he gets up, walks away, and then suddenly looks bewildered and walks back. Over and over again. This is basically happening, where Elliot's being able to kind of shorten the amount of time that Mr. Robot has control of him. But in response to that, Mr. Robot's becoming more violent in his attempts to stop Elliot from interfering.
Right.
So it starts off with just trying to leave, and it ends up with him throwing him against walls or smashing his head against a pipe or something,
just physically doing a number over on Elliot,
It's reminiscent of the scene in Fight Club where the narrator is beating the shit out of himself in his boss's office.
Right, exactly.
Where he threw himself against the wall. That was very, very similar to what we saw here with Elliot and Mr. Robot fighting. Or again in Fight Club, when you see when he's actively fighting Tyler Durden and they're cutting to the security camera footage of him rolling down the stairs and stuff.
Eventually Elliot gets to the server room, but he can't gain access to it. His access card doesn't work. This is where him and Mr. Robot start communicating. Elliot notices Mr. Robot leaves him a message that says basically stop fighting at kiddo, before you get both of us killed, And then Elliot makes an appeal to Mr. Robot. Well, Elliot actually reveals something to Mr. Robot that Mr. Robot didn't realize, and it's the fact that building doesn't have any paper records. Elliot didn't have any paper records shipped to that building.
Yeah, Elliot had them all shipped away from that building.
Yeah.
And And Elliot's basically saying, look, you're being played.
Yep.
There's no records. Here's the proof of it. Help me. Elliot gets knocked out again, glitches out. We see a little bit of Mr. Robot kind of looking at it, like pacing around the room, trying to figure out what he's going to do. Right. And then Elliot wakes up again, and now the door's open.
Right.
So he's able to kind of stop the building from blowing up at this point.
So he gains Mr. Robot's cooperation. And I think it's very clear now that, at least to Mr. Robot, it's very clear now that the Dark Army was manipulating him all along.
Mm-hmm. So now Elliot's, he's kind of saved the building. While that's happened, like right outside basically of where that happened, or right near where that happened,
Tyrell Wellick is in hysterics, screaming about how the building's going to blow up.
Mm-hmm. There's going to be an attack, and Dom's on the scene. He gets apprehended by just some cops there, but right. Dom's like right there when it happens, kind of like in shock, like, what the hell? Right here, really? And so she's like, what do you mean? What attack? And they keep showing the building, and you keep having this idea like, oh shit, the building's going to blow up. The building's going to blow up. But of course, Elliot stops that from happening. So there's no big attack.
Right.
But then Elliot.
Well, you gotta wonder though about Tyrell Wellick. Was that in the part of the plan? Was that in the notes he received from Irving, or did Tyrell go rogue there?
Yeah, it's kind of weird the way it's positioned, because we know that Irving apparently told him about his family, but we don't even know that for sure.
Right.
There's a lot of kind of like weird stuff going on with Tyrell's story, like where they're being just very vague about certain details.
Because we see Tyrell read the instructions, but we don't see what those instructions are.
And he burns the instructions as he was told to do.
He burns them. And if there was any note about his wife and son in there, we don't see any reaction or emotion about that.
Yeah, unless that's part of his hysteria that we didn't see before.
Right. Unless that happened off screen.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of vagueness there that leads us to not understand exactly what's going on.
Right.
So it seems like crisis averted, but we see White Rose again, and he's getting some message, and then at the same time as he's getting a message, right, the president of E Corp is getting a message from somebody else.
Oh yeah.
So we kind of see the two from across the room both getting approached by people whispering in their ears.
I think White Rose, right, or either that happened. White Rose gets a message I assumed it was a message about Tyrell and what he was doing. And, I think White Rose says, doesn't matter, doesn't change anything, just do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. And I think that's right around then. Yeah. It's right around that point. And he's been given that message. The guy from E Corp's been giving our message. So we thought crisis was averted, but as Elliot's walking down the street all proud of himself, he starts thinking actually like, if the Dark Army knew, and he thinks they did know, he knows they did know that Elliot had moved all those paper records, and why were they still trying to blow up that building? It doesn't make sense. Like and he says to himself in his narration, there's something they know that I don't. And then as he's walking down the street, he's looking at everybody, and everybody's like staring at their phones and kind of like freaking out, like some big thing happened.
Right.
And then he also says in his narration, there's something that everybody seems to know that I don't. And then he walks up to like a storefront where there's some TVs in it, and you see some people visibly shaken. Like, some people crying, some people just kind of staring in disbelief. And he goes up and he's looking at the window, and it's news footage. And there's been explosions at 71 other E-Corp facilities. These are the ones that Elliot shipped all the paper records to.
Yep, those are the ones Elliot shipped all the paper records to.
And they're saying in these reports that there's thousands dead.
Yeah,
which is
it's pretty horrific.
Which means basically that Elliot caused those additional deaths by diverting the records.
Right.
Because he thought he saved that one building.
Elliot opines that he was the single point of failure.
Yeah. That he saved the building, but then 72 or 71 other buildings were blown up. And so we realized that this is the news that the president of E Corp was given.
We realize White Rose is playing seventh dimensional chess.
Yeah. So White Rose, completely unperturbed by the one building he had to blow up, was perfectly fine blowing up 71 more and killing thousands of people.
Yeah.
And now we this is obviously going to create like a big problem for the president of E-Corp, who thinks that he just sealed his deal with the Dark Army and everything's done now, and with China and everything's done. And we saw him getting approached, as I said, by somebody whispering in his ear, clearly this news, that like that their buildings are being destroyed. And yeah, that's the end of the episode.
That's it.
Just tense, a big shocker ending.
Yeah, big shocker ending. One of the best episodes of the season.
Yeah. Again, with last week's episode too, man.
I say that
back to back, like amazing episodes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring up here, and I'd mentioned it before, that we believe that Angela is crazy, that she's drunk the Kool-Aid, and Elliot clearly believes that, Darlene clearly believes that, but I said there's an alternate theory out there for it.
Yes.
We've mentioned this theory before, kind of just in a dismissive way, but there's kind of more to talk about with it now. And that's the theory that this show is going to have legit time travel going on in it. And when we first brought up that theory and we talked about how there were some fans talking about that, the creator of the show kind of was dismissive about the theory. We kind of were like, oh, I can't imagine that happening. I don't think that's what's going to happen. Before I go any further, I want to say, like, whether it happens or not, I'm in, basically. I trust the creator of the show to see his vision through. If that means he's going to go in a time travel direction, I think he'll do something interesting with that. If it means that it's not, and it's just going to be Angela's just drunk from the well, and some other people have too, drunk the Kool-Aid, I'm good with that too. I think that's the more likely case, that there isn't going to be time travel, that this is just showing Angela being toyed with. But the interesting evidence that leads towards the time travel theory, or like as I perceive it, as kind of like a wink towards the people that are going to be thinking about the time travel theory more than actually supporting it at all, are, as we mentioned, these references to Back to the Future. This episode started with the Back to the Future theme playing, and then showing Angela watching a Back to the Future cartoon. As I mentioned before, in the first season, they had made a big reference to the Back to the Future 2, which kind of, I wonder if all the way back then, if Sam Esmail knew he was going to do something along those lines, or if he just was like, oh yeah, I made these characters fans of Back to the Future, so I can play into that now. Probably that.
It's probably more, it's probably more innocent, Back to the Future is something Sam Esmail.
He just tied into something he's done before, which some people find is like a downer. Like, oh, so he didn't plan all along? That sucks. It's like, I actually think that's good. That's what Vince Gilligan from Breaking Bad would do a lot. He would set up some insane cliffhanger to like end a season or something.
Right.
And just do something completely nutty. And people would go like, oh my, and it would resolve itself in such a cool way in the next season. And people were like, oh man, you planned all that out in advance. And he'd say, no, we purposely wrote ourselves into a corner and then took the time to write ourselves out of the corner.
Right.
And figure out a way. And that's where like the tension and everything of those great episodes came from, was them having to write themselves out of a corner. I think it's more along those lines, not necessarily being written into a corner, but like him playing on the time travel thing, the scene from season 1 where you find out that they're fans of Back to the Future, like him just kind of playing into that to reference, knowing that fans are going to be thinking about time travel, because they filmed all of this before a single episode of the season aired.
Right. That's true.
So it's not like they're reacting to current fan theories. It would be them reacting to what they think fan theories are going to be. So this is either them leaving a big ol' hint that time travel's coming, or it's, them kind of winking. It's clearly not a mistake though. They're very clearly winking. It's the question is, are they winking playfully saying, you think it's this, but it's not? Or are they winking saying, look what's coming?
Yeah. Time will tell. Ha.
The other thing that ties into the kind of time travel thing, which is just briefly, is there was an episode, I think it was episode 2 of this season. I don't remember exactly, but, where the episode began in like a place basically like CERN. Mm-hmm. It was like a hard-on collider like CERN or something. And they had the scene where you saw like the people walking through, and the guy was, talking about how, they have their power set up there, and there was like a tour going through, and then like the power fluctuated, and you saw 2 Asian men walk by, which turned out to be White Rose and one of his assistants.
Oh, yep.
And they went into, and you see this massive like particle accelerator thing. And that's what some people think is like basically going to cause some kind of a time
It's White Rose's general obsession with time.
Exactly. Like, even from the first time we saw him in the first season, he said that he hacks time.
Right.
The meaning that we took from that initially was that he was just very precise with his schedule, that everything had to be specifically plotted out in this exacting manner of time. That's kind of the implication that was initially made. But now there's like, oh, he hacks time. He's, going to change time.
Yeah.
And this is clearly what he sold Angela on.
Yeah.
That she thinks somehow she's getting her mom back.
Yeah, she thinks she's getting her mom back.
And we don't know, because in the second season, when White Rose convinced her of that, we saw where he said he was going to convince her of that, and then we saw her convinced of that.
Right.
We didn't see what convinced her.
Yeah, we didn't see what he showed her.
Yeah. And they made reference to it this season with Irving, when she talked to Irving and said, "Did he show it to you? Do you think it's real?" And Irving went on this elaborate story about some crazy instance, and she's like, "You're changing the topic." And he said, "No, what I'm trying to say is, I think anything's possible."
Right.
So these are kind of the explanations towards if there's some kind of a time travel thing going on.
It's an intriguing theory. Yeah, definitely.
It would be kind of crazy if it did happen. There's a part of me that would love that a show that has like no genre touch at all just suddenly goes fucking hard sci-fi out of nowhere. There's a part of me that loves that idea.
Right. That loves
and there's a part of me that hates it.
Right.
That's like, that goes against what the show's about, But like I said, I trust the creator of the show, and I just want to see his story play out the way he sees it.
Yeah, I want to see where he's going. Whichever way he goes, I'm curious. I'm on board.
But that's the episode. That's Mr. Robot. Like I said, we'll talk about that and Stranger Things again next week. Even though Thanksgiving's next week, we'll still talk about it. We'll probably have the podcast up a little bit later next week. I think we're planning on trying to record on Friday after Thanksgiving, but we're going to work it out. We'll figure something out.
Sure.
But there will be an episode next week. But to leave you guys with what's coming up in the week ahead, by the time this podcast is out, Netflix will have 2 shows dropping. The next season of Longmire, what we've all been waiting for. What we've all been waiting for is the season premiere of The Punisher.
Yes.
Which by the time you hear this podcast, it's already out. So you're probably, not listening to the podcast because you're watching The Punisher.
Exactly.
By the time you listen to this podcast, you probably finished The Punisher. But yeah, so that comes out. I'm going to say that I'm live tweeting it. It's useless to tell you that I'm doing that right now because by the time this is out, it have already been out.
You won't be live tweeting it by the time this is out.
Yeah, I'll have live tweeted it at midnight. So right now for me, it comes out midnight Pacific time. For me right now, it's 2:49 p.m. So it's literally an hour and 11 minutes until The Punisher airs, and I'll be live tweeting. But by the time you listen to this, it will have already been out. Then this Sunday, Search Party returns for its second season on TBS. That was a real interesting comedy series along the lines of all these other really interesting comedy series that TBS has had in the last couple of years. So like in the last 2 years, they've just been doing some really interesting stuff. So, and this is one of their most interesting shows, their most interesting comedies. Then on Tuesday, November 21st, another Marvel series drops on a streaming service. This time, Marvel's Runaways.
Ah, yes.
So another one we're looking forward to. Then on Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017, Godless hits Netflix. And then on Thursday, November 23rd, 2017, She's Gotta Have It hits Netflix. This is based on the Spike Lee movie of the same name, and Spike Lee did the TV series as well.
Right.
So if you liked She's Gotta Have It, which is a classic Spike Lee movie, well, now it's got a series from Spike Lee.
All right. I guess.
And then next Friday, Black Friday, November 24th, 2017, Frontier returns to Netflix. This is like that Jason Momoa show about the Canadian wilderness. In the 1800s or something. That's back for its second season, and Trailer Park Boys has like a special or a special mini series or something on Netflix.
Okay, sure.
That drops that day as well. So that's it. That's what's coming up in the week ahead. Thank you everybody for listening to the podcast. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. Will is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well as our site, TVEnthusiast.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel, as well as some other videos and stuff you can check out. So until next week, when we record, I believe on Black Friday, unless something changes, thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@TVEnthusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more coverage